Whenever a small independent movie ends up on the radar of all the critics I follow, that is something to pay attention to. Fancy Dance, starring Lily Gladstone, managed to pull that off. All the critics that I love have called it a masterpiece. Today on the podcast, what Fancy Dance gets right. I'm Alamin Abdul Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Look, Lily Gladstone described Fancy Dance as the movie that fills the void left by Killers of the Flower Moon. And that is a significant statement coming from Lily. That's because Killers of the Flower Moon was the Martin Scorsese movie that won her a Golden Globe. It got her nominated for an Oscar. We talked about Killers of the Flower Moon on this very show. That's a movie that focuses on the perpetrators of colonial violence. This movie, though, Fancy Dance, made by Seneca Cayuga filmmaker named Erica Tremblay, focuses on the Indigenous women who survive and thrive because of the powerful connections to each other and their culture. In this movie, Lily Gladstone plays Jax. She's a woman living on a reservation in Oklahoma whose sister goes missing. She ends up becoming both responsible for her 13-year-old niece and responsible for the search for her sister. Fancy Dance is a movie that is right now out on Apple TV+. Angela Sterritt and Marek Tyler have both seen it, and they're here to talk about why this movie is such a groundbreaking film. Angela and Marek, welcome to the show, friends.
Thanks for having us.
Listen, Angela, I'm going to start with you, and maybe the circumstances under which you watched this movie. Where were you when you watched Fancy Dance?
I was pretty lucky in that I watched Fancy Dance with about 10 Indigenous women under the stars on an island while we were tanning deer hides. So it was pretty special to be in that sort of safe environment and then have, these amazing people to talk about with the movie afterwards. So yeah. It was incredible.
And what was your reaction to this movie as you watched it for the first time?
It was, I totally agree with Lily Gladstone. It was sort of like the polar opposite of Killers of the Flower Moon. It was focused on the fierceness of Indigenous women. There was no victim narrative. There wasn't a moment while I was watching the film that I was like, wait a second, critiquing it, or I didn't have time to do that because it was so brilliantly made. The whole time I was just on the edge of my seat, captivated, and it was so powerful, so moving. I think I cried numerous times, but just felt so empowered, and that's very rare. But I think, like you said, it's made by a Cayuga Seneca filmmaker in her community and from the lens of Indigenous women. And that's what makes this movie so powerful and so different.
Marek, I think there are a few reasons why it can't avoid being in juxtaposition and in conversation with Killers of the Flower Moon. The main one being that Lily Gladstone was in both, but also I think she made some interesting choices when it came to promoting Killers of the Flower Moon. You're supposed to be on the stump, and you're trying to tell all the other Oscar voters, hey, you should vote for me. But she spent so much of that promotional tour talking about Fancy Dance instead of talking about Killers of the Flower Moon. So watching this movie compared to, say, Killers of the Flower Moon, how can you tell that this one is a film made by an Indigenous filmmaker who grew up on that reservation where it's set? What tells do you use to tell?
I think there's a nuance to Indigenous artwork that it's kind of like if you know, you know. It's the subtleties and the nuance of how maybe the set design. Maybe you see, like when I go home, a lot of times you'll see people who decorate their places with a blanket on the wall, or you'll see a lot of pictures of family all over the place.
Yeah,
and you saw that nuance in this film, the way that the way that people interacted with each other was nonchalant. It wasn't force-fed. And I really loved how internally it felt like community. But more importantly, for me, I'm so happy Angela's here because this movie gave a perspective that is not my own. And it's really challenging to kind of speak on it because Angela is a woman who's has a learned and lived experience that I do not have. So this was a window into this movie for me to you know to just to watch and to learn and to listen and to see these matriarchs,
Hmm.
from Flowers of the Moon to this movie. These matriarchs hold a space that is so powerful and make decisions and and make sure that their heritage, their culture, their dance, their perspectives, their agency is not being lost. And that's, when I think about the nuance between these two movies,
Mhm.
that's what I saw was the nuance of how powerful these women are.
I really love the way that you sort of said, hey, there are things I can speak to and things that I can't. So, Angela, let me put it to you. I mean, like, this is the movie that deals with issues like missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, the removal of Indigenous children from their homes to be placed with white families, racism and policing. All of these issues are baked into this movie. These themes play out in these characters' lives in ways that are not particularly soapboxy. You don't say, this is the portion where we are now going to deal with this issue. It is sort of just baked into the full reality of these fully realized characters who have other aspirations and hopes outside of those contexts also. How do you think this movie gets at those truths without feeling exploitative?
Hmm. I mean, one of the things that I just felt throughout the whole movie was this baseline of love,
Hmm.
which is so real in our communities. That resistance to assimilation into white supremacist culture is so real. And the reason why it is so important for us is for the love of our communities. Colonization, the impetus of it was to fracture our families. And you see this throughout the movie. And I love the nuance in the characters. Like even the white dad, I was like, I know you. I know you from the res. I know this guy. You're the one married to the woman and you sort of get it, but you can be assimilated too, right?
Hmm.
By my friends were calling his new wife the Karen. Um, but I think one of the things I've been noticing in films lately, I noticed it in the movie Swagger too, was that you can be real, but you can also encapsulate dreams. I think
Hmm.
there was this thing, even 10 years ago, like, oh, we need to be so real. Like we need to show the racism. We need to show the toxic masculinity because that's the way it is. But what about our dreams? What
Hmm.
about our dreams to have ceremony integrated into our lives? What about our dreams of speaking our language fluently as a 37-year-old and a 13-year-old?
Hmm.
That was just, I was like, yes, like let's normalize this stuff through film. So
Hmm.
that was one of the reasons why I found it so powerful.
I want to get back to language in just a moment, but if I can just go back to a thing that you mentioned earlier, you said you felt safe when you were watching this movie. Just to give a quick sort of plot recap of the movie is about Jax trying to find her sister Tawi while trying to take care of her niece Roki here. And they get into all kinds of trouble. It's essentially a road trip movie for much of the film, and then there's sort of a couple of turns from that kind of construct. And Roki's sort of on her way to a powwow where she's hoping to meet with her mother, who has gone missing. That's sort of what we know of this movie. This is not a plot where I would hear that and go, one would feel safe watching that. When you say you felt safe, what are you getting at, Angela? What do you mean when you say this movie still managed to make you feel safe?
I mean, I think if you put it beside Killers of the Flower Moon, like
Hmm.
that movie, I felt very unsafe. I was like, why are the women, the indigenous women, positioned as like weak and not very intelligent and
Hmm.
just assimilating so quickly, and these like really horrific scenes of violence. One of the
Yeah.
things that we loved at like the indigenous women that I watched the film with is that they didn't show Towie's body or
Yeah.
talk about her death. It was about who she was in her life,
Yeah.
which was a complex character. The ending, I won't give that away,
Yeah.
but we all loved that too. Like you don't get to see the horrors of what transpired after that, and we all know what's probably going to happen, right?
Hmm.
we were like, thank goodness it ended, not like that. But the whole way I was like, this is an I didn't know about Erica. I didn't know who she was, but I was like, 1000%, this is an Indigenous woman's lens, and I'm protected as I'm
Mm.
watching this.
Hmm.
And I'm going to get a lot out of this in terms of being able to watch the film and just be like, this is brilliantly made.
Yeah.
This isn't a a hot mess. This is a beautiful movie.
Yeah, you can sort of immediately when you start watching the movie, you can tell that there's like craft at work. Erica, we should say
Yes.
that Erica directed a few episodes of Reservation Dogs, but this was her directorial debut. Merrick, let's go back to language for a moment. One of the really striking things about Fancy Dance is that they move between English and Cayuga, a language that's only spoken by about 100 people, and the actors had to learn the language for this movie. Let's just take a moment to listen to one of those scenes.
How do you say mother in the language?
No.
How do you say aunt?
Means
How do you say it?
Knoha.
What does it mean?
It means aunt.
No, what does it really mean?
It means small mother. It means your other mother.
That's what you're supposed to be for me.
Merrick, you've talked about the idea of world building. Okay, first of all, I just want
Oh my
okay.
God.
Let me
We're
pause
both crying.
and recognize that you're both are kind of tearing up.
Tearing up.
Oh my
Wow.
gosh.
Oh,
Okay.
same.
Do you want to talk about that first, about your tearful reaction? That was a really powerful moment in the movie. Do you want to talk about that real quick?
Angela, like, I don't know what it was like for you, but when I watched it and listening to them speak, I just felt so much pride in Indigenous, because the language is so the language, I don't know what your language, but our language is so we experience the language.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
When they were speaking in their language, the relationship to themselves, the relationship to their community, the Wakota, and the kinship terms that are being used, it just made me. There is that safe space that was being created,
Hmm.
and I felt like we didn't have to hide our language. I didn't have to hide who we were. For me, this movie was about the erasure of a culture, the erasure of a perspective, erasure a way of knowing and being, and this language symbolized the resurgence, the power of women, the power of a community that is coming back. And I just love that so much. So when I heard that just now, I thought about my sisters. I thought about my mom,
Yeah.
and I thought about how my auntie is my little mom, and it just filled me with so much love all at once, and just in a few seconds. So that's how to me this movie was so good. Angela, what about you? How did that make you feel?
I think in our Indigenous communities, like we're not atomized in the same way that white supremacy is. We're not just mom, dad, child. Like our aunties, our uncles, our cousins, our grandparents are everything. So to like show that, and for her to be like, it was just powerful. Yeah, I just
Hmm.
and the language, the power of the language and how it was utilized throughout the film too, even
Yeah.
like as a stealthy device, right? To
Oh yeah.
like
When they're
be
trying to sort of get
talking to
around the cop. That's right. I remember. Yeah.
and be like, we're gonna find our sister together. And I loved that. I love that he didn't become like working with the FBI and like dissing his family through that, but he was actually like, we're gonna do this and we're gonna be stealth about it.
They're
So yeah.
they're so much more powerful than the non-indigenous speaking peoples in that character.
Yes.
Their power of language gave them such
Yes.
a leg up.
I was going to say, like,
Yes.
that's why I wanted to talk about the role that language plays here, because again, we are taking a language that is spoken by about 100 people, and then you're teaching these actors the importance of learning how to speak this language for this movie. That you're right, it functions sometimes in ways that are connective, sometimes in ways that are like kind of like fracturing, like it's used in a fight very powerfully. It's also ends up being used as a very brilliant kind of cloaking device. I wanted to talk to you maybe, Merrick, about like this idea of world building, this imagined future that is totally possible. What did it mean for you to see these characters speaking Cayuga so fluently?
Well, Angela said something at the top, which I really loved, which was not, it wasn't, it was not othered. It was
Mm,
the two languages sat side by side, and the characters had the aha moments between those two languages.
mm-hmm.
To find, so when I think of world building, I think of like in 50 years, Angela, wouldn't it be wonderful if our languages were spoken fluently at a community level and also at a like in a like an urban indigenous level, so that we when we were with people and we wanted to express ourselves in a very specific way,
Hmm.
we can do that and feel pride in that and know that they understand us even better. This covenant that we have as, our different cultures growing up together, growing together, in worldviews coming together, becoming stronger, becoming smarter, evolving. That's languages coming together and understanding what each other are saying in different ways. And that's what I saw when I watched this movie, was this very powerful women speaking, and a brother speaking together and
Yeah.
empowering each other to move forward. And I love that as a world building idea. It is something aspirational, and it's not that far away. We can do this. Like, it's not that far away.
Yeah.
That's a really beautiful statement. I just want to just kind of pause on that for a moment. But I also, as I was watching this, Angela, I was thinking about this other movie, Leave No Trace, by Deborah Granick. Deborah Granick is one of my favorite filmmakers. She also made Winter's Bone. She's this director who is so good at the granular that is like, this is how all of these larger issues end up manifesting themselves in a person's life, without ever saying these are how the larger issues are manifesting themselves in this person's life. Like, Deborah Granick has this ability to go as granular as possible in order to get as universal as possible. Winter's Bone does that really well. Leave No Trace does that really well. But as I was watching this movie, it does that with language, but it also does that with ritual. Like, there was this beautiful scene that is built around when Roki gets her first period. Do you want to talk about the experience of watching that scene and what it was like for this movie to take great care with ritual in that way?
I thought that was so powerful. And again, back to filmmakers doing something different, which is normalizing um, behaviors, right? And I think for us, that celebration, that rites of passage of moon time,
Hmm.
we don't do that in the way that was depicted in the film, but we did at one point, and some people still do, but it would be very rare. And to show how important that is, that they have to steal, some wood off the wall
Yeah.
and create, some water. And I was like, oh my God. And then even Roki walking away, and she had a moontime accident, so her period was on her pants,
Yeah.
and her auntie was like, "That's okay." I was like, "Oh my God," because growing up with any woman, it's like such a shame. It's
Hmm.
like the worst possible thing that can happen. But for Roki just to be like, "Yeah, whatever, it happens all the time. Who cares?"
Hmm.
That was a really, really powerful couple of scenes for me to watch, and really signaled like, this is a showcasing of Indigenous futurisms, right?
Hmm.
Moving forward, how can we honor and celebrate Indigenous ceremony, Indigenous women, right?
Hmm.
In a movie that's about MMIWG, like, so precious.
Hmm. What
Yeah.
I want to talk about the context in which this movie is arriving right now, because this movie premiered at Sundance last year, so it took some time for it to make it to people. The movie came out of Sundance, and then it just didn't find a distributor for a whole year. That is a pretty long time, and then
Hmm.
eventually Apple TV picked it up, and now it's on Apple TV Plus, and I think it sort of debuted in some theaters last week. Lily Gladstone made Fancy Dance around the same time that she made Killers of the Flower Moon. I want you guys to take a listen to this part of her conversation with Tom Power on Q from just a few weeks ago.
having played both of these characters within a year of each other, the way that these stories needed to be seen together, the way that like storytellers will often tell more than one story in conjunction with each other because they contextualize each other.
Right.
People were asking for it. People were looking for it. The response from killers, people were, without knowing it, asking for Fancy Dance. They wanted more of Molly, her sisters. They wanted more time in an Osage perspective in that story. And it's like, well, here's this film.
The idea that this movie answers the thing that people are looking for when they watch Killers of the Flower Moon, I think that's really compelling. Maybe Marek first, then Angela. How do you think Fancy Dance answers Killers of the Flower Moon?
Well, with Killers, such a violent film, the Killers for me was like, it was an external viewpoint. It was hard to watch the erasure of agency. It was hard. Women made the decisions. They are the decision makers, and to watch their agency be like systematically removed, violently removed. I wanted. It was a beautiful movie, and I really liked it. But I've only watched it once, and I don't know if I could watch it again. You know, it was hard. It was a tough one. So when we move into this one, for me, it was the internal vision, that internal, it felt like community. It felt like a safe space. Angela, you really nailed it, I think, when you said like this movie creates a safe space. It reminded me of a story that needed to be told, that I wanted to hear. And I'm so happy that it took an Indigenous woman, an Indigenous production team, an Indigenous creative team to do this, to challenge the status quo, to give a perspective that is needed and required, and a perspective that I don't know. The 2S LGBT plus community, the women's community, they've been preyed upon, and here is a movie that creates a safe space for them and for that perspective. And it was just beautiful. And I loved that about it. So the two movies, one is external, Killers. This one for me is quite more internal.
Angela, what Marek just said there also reminded me of the fact that we've had this whole conversation. We didn't even talk about Lily Gladstone's character, Jax, her queerness, which is something that she sort of navigates with grace, but also is not something that she's willing to be public about. That is like a through line in that movie. I wish we had more time to talk about this, but listen, we got maybe a couple of minutes left here. Let me ask you this. When you watch this movie, what does the arrival of Fancy Dance signal to you? Or like, what does this movie change for you now, the fact that this movie's here?
That this can be done. You know, this is the future. This is hope for Indigenous people. This is hope for Indigenous women, girls, men, boys, non-binary people. This is it. Like, if you want a movie to transform narratives that we've had to grapple with our entire lives, this is it. This is the future.
But that's all right. What I like about that is that there is no particular holdback in your recommendation. You're like, no. If you want to see what the future of Indigenous cinema looks like, start with Fancy Dance. Marek, I'll give you the last word on this. What did this movie help you work through? We got maybe a minute left.
It helped me process my family a bit. I reached back and I got to speak with my sisters and my mom about it. And we talked about our real life experience of losing our cousin. We lost her, and then we lost her aunt. And my aunt was a fancy dancer. And, and she had to navigate the pain and the pain of loss of a daughter. And so for me, like, my mom and I talked late last night, and my sisters and I, we chatted on our thread, and just, it was, for me, it's a beginning of a conversation that I need to keep on having. So
a beginning.
It's helping me have a conversation with my family.
Wow. That's a lot to sit with. I'm going to go and sit with that. But in the meantime, Marek and Angela, thank you so much for your time, for your energy, and for your presence in this conversation. Thank you so much again.
Thanks for having me.
Of
Muy
course.
estás.
Thank you. Angela Sterritt is an author and journalist from the Gitxsan Nation in BC. Marek Tyler is an artist and administrator from Treaty 6 territory and the Onion Lake Cree Nation. And by the way, you can watch Fancy Dance on Apple Plus. My name is Alameen. This show is called Commotion, and we will see you tomorrow.